I'll never forget the day I realized I was being taken advantage of at work. It was a typical Monday morning, and I was already running late. My name is Gabriella, and I'm 28 years old. I've always been a hard worker, dedicated to my job and passionate about what I do. But as I sat at my desk, sipping my coffee and staring at the stack of files in front of me, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I had been working long hours for weeks, often staying late to finish projects and meet deadlines. And yet, when I looked at my paycheck, I realized that I wasn't being compensated for all the extra time I was putting in. It was like my boss, Matteo, expected me to work for free. I felt a knot in my stomach as I thought about all the times I had stayed late, missing dinner with my family and friends, sacrificing my own needs for the sake of the job. And for what? So my boss could reap the benefits of my hard work while I struggled to make ends meet. It wasn't fair, and I knew I had to do something about it. But as I sat there, feeling frustrated and angry, I couldn't help but wonder, what would happen if I spoke up? Would I be able to make a change, or would I just be silenced? I took a deep breath and began to think about my next move, knowing that it wouldn't be easy but determined to fight for what I deserved. I worked as a marketing specialist at a mid-sized firm in the city. My name is Gabriella, and I was 28 years old. I had been with the company for 3 years, working my way up from an entry-level position. My boss, Matteo, was the creative director, and we worked closely together on campaigns. The office was fast-paced, with a young and ambitious team. We were known for our innovative ideas and tight deadlines. My colleagues were friendly, and we often grabbed lunch together. I enjoyed my job, but lately, I'd been noticing that my workload had increased significantly. I was handling more projects and working longer hours to meet the demands. My days were filled with brainstorming sessions, client meetings, and late nights spent perfecting campaign materials. Despite the chaos, I took pride in my work and was determined to deliver exceptional results. Little did I know, my dedication was about to be put to the test in ways I never imagined. I was sitting at my desk, going over the latest project files, when I noticed a discrepancy in my pay stub. I had worked over 20 hours of overtime in the past 2 weeks, but my paycheck didn't reflect the extra hours. I felt a surge of frustration as I realized I wasn't being paid for my overtime work. I decided to speak with Matteo about it, hoping it was an oversight. "Matteo, I think there's a mistake with my pay," I said when I met with him. "I've worked a lot of overtime recently, but it doesn't seem to be reflected in my paycheck." Matteo looked at me with a mixture of surprise and annoyance. "Gabriella, you're a salaried employee," he said. "You're expected to put in the hours necessary to get the job done. We don't pay overtime for salaried employees." I was taken aback. "But I've been working so many extra hours," I said. "I thought I would be compensated for my time." Matteo shrugged. "That's just the way it is. You'll get used to it." I left his office feeling frustrated and undervalued. It wasn't just about the money. It was about being treated fairly. I started to wonder if anyone else in the company was going through the same thing. And I began to think about what I could do to change the situation. I started to keep track of my hours, documenting every late night and weekend spent working. The numbers were staggering. I was putting in an extra 10-15 hours a week, easily. I began to feel like I was being taken advantage of, like my time and energy weren't valued. I started to wonder if anyone else was going through this, or if it was just me. I confided in a few colleagues, and they shared similar stories. "I'm so tired of working for free," one of them said. "I feel like we're just expected to burn out." I realized I wasn't alone, and that made me even more determined to do something about it. I started to research labor laws and company policies, looking for any loopholes or ways to address the issue. I also began to talk to my colleagues more openly about the problem, trying to build a sense of solidarity and shared purpose. We started to brainstorm ways to bring our concerns to management and to demand fair compensation for our work. The more I learned, the more I realized that our company was not unique in this regard. Many companies were exploiting their employees in similar ways, but that didn't make it any more acceptable. I was determined to take a stand, even if it meant going against the company culture. I was ready to fight for my rights and for the rights of my colleagues. I went to the HR department to report my concerns, but they seemed uninterested in helping me. Company policy is clear on salaried employees, the HR representative said. You're expected to put in the time necessary to get the job done. I asked if there were any options for compensating employees for their extra work, but she just shook her head. Not for salaried employees, she said. Maybe you should talk to your manager about adjusting your workload. I left the meeting feeling frustrated and defeated. My colleagues weren't much help either. Some of them seemed resigned to the situation, while others were afraid to speak up. Be careful, Gabriella, one of them warned me. Mateo's not someone you want to cross. I realized that I was on my own in this fight. Even some of my closest colleagues were hesitant to support me. What if we get fired? One of them asked. I understood their concerns, but it didn't make me any less determined. I decided to take matters into my own hands and started to gather evidence of the company's practices. I documented every conversation, every meeting, and every instance of unpaid overtime. I also started to research labor laws and precedents, looking for any way to hold the company accountable. The more I dug, the more I realized that this was a systemic problem, not just an isolated incident. I was determined to expose it, no matter what it took. I was working longer hours than ever before, and the stress was starting to take a toll on my body. I was constantly tired, and my mind was always racing. I couldn't sleep at night, thinking about all the work I had to do the next day. My relationships with my friends and family began to suffer. I would cancel plans at the last minute, or not show up at all. I felt like I was losing myself in the process. My health started to decline, and I would get sick more often. I felt like I was burning out, and I didn't know how to stop it. One day, I received an email from Mateo, asking me to take on an additional project. I felt a wave of dread wash over me. I didn't know how I was going to get everything done. I started to wonder if it was all worth it. Was the job worth sacrificing my health and my relationships? I felt trapped, like I was stuck in a never-ending cycle of work and stress. I knew I needed to make a change, but I didn't know where to start. I felt like I was running out of options, and I didn't know what the future held. I was exhausted, and I didn't know how much longer I could keep going. I sat at my desk, staring at the latest email from Mateo. He was asking me to work on a new project, one that would require me to put in even more hours. I felt a surge of determination. I knew I couldn't keep going on like this. I picked up the phone and dialed the number of a labor lawyer I had been researching. I need to talk to you about my job, I said when she answered. I think they're taking advantage of me, and I don't know what to do. The lawyer listened to my story, and then she gave me some advice. You have rights, Gabriella, she said. You don't have to put up with this. Let's talk about your options. I felt a sense of hope for the first time in months. Maybe, just maybe, I could do something to change my situation. I scheduled a meeting with the lawyer for the next day, and I started to gather all the evidence I had collected. I was going to take a stand, no matter what it took. I was going to fight for my rights, and for the rights of my colleagues. I was ready to take on the company, and I was ready to win. The next day, I met with the lawyer, and we started to discuss my case. We'll file a complaint with the labor board, she said. We'll get you the compensation you deserve. I felt a sense of relief wash over me. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to fight. I was ready to stand up for myself, and for what was right. I decided to schedule a meeting with Mateo and HR to discuss my concerns. I spent hours preparing, gathering evidence, and practicing my presentation. I was determined to make my case clearly and professionally. As I sat outside the meeting room, I went over my notes one last time. I knew this could be a turning point in my situation. The meeting began, and I presented my case, detailing the unpaid overtime and the impact it was having on my life. Mateo and the HR representative listened, their expressions unreadable. "I understand your concerns, Gabriella," the HR representative said finally. "But company policy is clear on salaried employees. Perhaps we can discuss adjusting your workload or providing additional support." Mateo chimed in, "You're a valuable member of the team, Gabriella. We want to make sure you're happy and fulfilled in your role." I wasn't convinced. "I want to be compensated for my work," I said firmly. "I've been putting in extra hours for months, and it's not fair that I'm not being paid for it." The HR representative leaned forward. "I understand where you're coming from, but we can't make exceptions to company policy. Maybe we can discuss a performance-based raise in the future." I left the meeting feeling frustrated and uncertain. Had I made a mistake by speaking up? Would it damage my relationship with Mateo and the company? Or would it lead to positive change? I knew I had to be prepared for any outcome. I started to think about my next steps and what I would do if the situation didn't improve. I was determined to fight for my rights, no matter what it took. I stood outside Mateo's office, my heart racing as I prepared for the confrontation. I took a deep breath and walked in. "Mateo, we need to talk," I said firmly. Mateo looked up from his computer, a hint of annoyance on his face. "What's going on, Gabriella?" he asked. "You know exactly what's going on," I said, my voice steady. "I've been working overtime for months without pay. It's not fair, and I won't stand for it." Mateo leaned back in his chair, a defensive tone creeping into his voice. "You're a salaried employee, Gabriella. You're expected to put in the time necessary to get the job done." "That's not the point," I said, my voice rising. "The point is that I'm not being compensated for my work. I'm not a machine, Mateo. I have bills to pay and a life outside of this office." Mateo's expression turned cold. "You're being paid a salary, Gabriella. You're expected to manage your time accordingly." "I'm not being paid enough," I said, my voice firm. "And I'm not going to continue working like this without being compensated fairly." Mateo's face turned red with anger. "You're being unreasonable, Gabriella. You're lucky to have a job at this company." "I'm not being unreasonable," I said, standing my ground. "I'm being treated unfairly, and I won't stand for it. I demand to be compensated for my overtime work." The conversation was going nowhere. I knew I had to take a stand and fight for what was rightfully mine. I was determined to see this through, no matter what it took. Mateo's expression turned icy. "If you're not happy with the way things are done here, maybe you're not the right person for this job." I stood up, my eyes locked on his. "Maybe this company isn't the right place for me," I said, my voice firm. "But I'll make sure I'm paid for my work, one way or another." After the meeting, Mateo called me into his office again. "Gabriella, I need to talk to you about our conversation earlier," he said, his voice firm but controlled. "You're not happy with your compensation package, and I understand that. But I have to tell you, your attitude is starting to concern me." I felt a knot in my stomach. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "You're being confrontational and difficult," Mateo said. "And to be honest, it's not the kind of behavior we expect from our employees here." I knew where this was going. "Are you threatening me?" I asked, my voice firm. Mateo leaned forward. "I'm just stating the facts, Gabriella. If you can't work well with the team and follow company policies, maybe this isn't the right place for you." I felt a surge of anger. "You're trying to intimidate me," I said, "but it won't work. I'm not going to back down." Mateo's expression turned cold. "I'm not trying to intimidate you, Gabriella. I'm just telling you how it is. You need to shape up and follow the rules, or you're out." I stood up, my eyes locked on his. "I'm not going to be bullied or intimidated," I said. "I'll keep fighting for what's right, No matter what. Mateo's face turned red with anger. "You're making a big mistake, Gabriella," he said. "You're going to regret this." I walked out of his office, feeling a sense of determination. I knew I had made the right decision, and I was ready to face whatever came next. But as I walked back to my desk, I couldn't shake the feeling that Mateo's words were more than just a threat. They sounded like a promise. I walked back to my desk, my mind racing with thoughts of what had just happened. I knew I had to take action, to fight for my rights and seek justice. I started to make a plan, thinking about my next steps and what I needed to do to move forward. I spent the rest of the day researching labor laws and talking to my colleagues, gathering information and building a case. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was determined to see it through. I was going to stand up for myself and for my rights, no matter what it took. The next day, I met with my lawyer again, and we started to discuss my options. "We can file a complaint with the labor board," she said. "We can also talk to other employees who may have been affected by the company's policies." I nodded, feeling a sense of determination. "Let's do it," I said. "I'm ready to fight for what's right." My lawyer smiled. "I'm with you, Gabriella. We'll get through this together." Over the next few weeks, I worked with my lawyer to build a case against the company. We gathered evidence and interviewed other employees, building a strong case. I was determined to see it through, to fight for my rights and seek justice. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was ready for whatever came next. I was going to stand up for myself, and I was going to win. I was ready to take on the company, and I was ready to fight. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months. Finally, the day arrived when we would meet with the company's representatives to discuss a possible settlement. I sat in the conference room, my lawyer by my side, and faced the company's lawyers. "We're willing to offer you a settlement," one of them said. "A payment of 6 months' worth of overtime pay, and a guarantee that your working hours will be reviewed and adjusted." I looked at my lawyer, who nodded slightly. "That's a good offer," she said. "But we want to make sure it's fair." The company's lawyers conferred with each other, and then one of them spoke up. "We'll increase the payment to a year's worth of overtime pay," he said, "and we'll implement a new policy to ensure that all employees are fairly compensated for their work." I thought about it for a moment, weighing my options. It was a good offer, and it would mean that I would be able to move on with my life. But I also knew that it wouldn't change the company's behavior, and that other employees might still be exploited. "I want to accept the offer," I said finally, "but I also want to make sure that the company is held accountable for their actions." The company's lawyers nodded, and we began to discuss the details of the settlement. After a few hours of negotiation, we reached an agreement. The company would pay me a year's worth of overtime pay, and they would implement a new policy to ensure that all employees were fairly compensated for their work. I left the meeting feeling relieved and vindicated. I had stood up for myself, and I had won. But I knew that this was just the beginning, and that there was still much work to be done to ensure that all employees were treated fairly. I sat in my living room, looking back on the past few months. It had been a long and difficult journey, but I had finally come out on top. I thought about what I had learned, about standing up for myself and fighting for what's right. I realized that I had been living in a state of fear, afraid to speak up and afraid to rock the boat. But I had learned that sometimes it's necessary to take a stand, even if it's uncomfortable or difficult. I thought about the people who had supported me, my lawyer and my colleagues. They had been instrumental in helping me navigate the process and fight for my rights. I felt grateful for their support and their bravery. I also thought about the impact that this experience had had on me. I had grown as a person, becoming more confident and more assertive. I had learned to stand up for myself and to fight for what's right, even when it's hard. I knew that this experience would stay with me for a long time, and that it would shape me into a stronger and more resilient person. I stood up, feeling a sense of closure and a sense of accomplishment. I knew that I would carry the lessons I had learned with me, and that I would use them to make a difference in the world. I walked over to the window, looking out at the city. I felt a sense of hope and a sense of possibility. I knew that there would be more challenges ahead, but I was ready to face them. I was ready to stand up for myself and for others, and to fight for what's right. If you're facing a similar situation, know that you're not alone. Many people have been in your shoes, and there are resources available to help. Don't be afraid to speak up and fight for your rights. Whether it's reporting unpaid overtime, addressing workplace harassment, or advocating for better working conditions, your voice matters. Share your story in the comment section below. Seek support from colleagues and loved ones, and know that there are people who care and want to help. Together, we can create a more just and equitable workplace for everyone. If you're looking for resources or want to share your own experience, there are many organizations and support groups available. Don't hesitate to reach out and take the first step towards creating positive change. Your actions can make a difference, and together, we can build a better future for all workers. Smash the like and subscribe button for more inspiring stories like this.